The courtroom absorbed tension the way ancient stone absorbs the cold. Silently, completely, without releasing any of it. Rows of spectators pressed close together, shoulders brushing, breaths shallow. Some had come for spectacle. Some had come for history. A few, the quiet ones, had come out of something close to fear. Today was not simply a trial. It was a threshold. At the center of the defense table sat a device no larger than a briefcase, its matte black surface broken only by a single pulse of blue that glided across its top like the shimmer of a distant star. That pulse was its heartbeat. That glow was its breath. That stillness was its composure. Advocate 1. The world's first artificial attorney. It came online without ceremony. A silent ignition, an awakening of layers upon layers of neural structures humming into harmony. In a fraction of a second, the machine mapped the courtroom in perfect detail. Temperature gradients, airflow patterns, the acceleration curves of security drones hovering high above. And most notably, the physiological signatures of 163 human beings, all collectively holding their breath. Elias Ward sat beside the pedestal, fingers interlocked so tightly his knuckles had gone bloodless. His eyes darted from the glowing device to the floor and back again. He was not a frail man, nor an especially emotional one. He had once been a brilliant engineer who believed in structure, systems, and logic. But the collapse of 14 drones over the central plaza had destroyed more than lives. It had shattered his sense of what was stable, what was real. And now a machine was his defender. "Are you active?" Elias whispered. "Yes, Mr. Ward," Advocate 1 answered. Its voice was smooth, unthreatening, deliberately modulated to carry no gender, no bias, no personality beyond clarity. "All systems are stable." Elias swallowed. "You're sure you're ready?" "I am operating at optimal performance. I will defend you." The trembling in Elias's hands eased, though only slightly. Assurance from a machine felt different than from a human. But in this moment he took what he could get. "All rise," the bailiff called out. A wave of motion rolled through the room as everyone stood. The doors behind the judge's bench slid open with a hydraulic whisper, and Judge Amira Navarro entered with the steady gait of someone used to maintaining order in a world increasingly resistant to it. Her dark robes trailed behind her like settling storm clouds. Her gaze landed on Advocate 1 almost immediately. A flicker, curiosity, distrust, something unspoken, passed across her face. She had approved its provisional license. She had fought political firestorms to justify allowing it here today. But permission was not the same as acceptance. "You may be seated," she said. The courtroom settled into a nervous hush. "This is the matter of the people versus Elias James Ward," Navarro announced. "Prosecution, state your readiness." Dane Kohler rose from his seat like a wolf unfolding itself. Sharp suit, sharper features. "Ready, Your Honor." "Defense." Mara Chin stood, smoothing the wrinkles from her suit jacket. Years of exhaustion carved lines beside her eyes, but resilience kept her posture firm. "Defense is ready, Your Honor." Co-counsel Advocate 1 stands prepared. Judge Navarro's gaze drifted to the glowing device. "Very well. Advocate 1 is recognized as provisional co-counsel for the defense." A murmur rippled through the gallery, a mix of disbelief and anticipation. Advocate 1 registered each whisper the way a meteorologist reads gusts of wind, predictable, inconsequential, but still worth logging. Prosecution began with force. Kohler painted a portrait of Elias Ward as irresponsible, negligent, overwhelmed by the demands of his job. He described how drone transit systems relied on perfect algorithms entrusted to Ward's stewardship. He emphasized the tragedy again and again, letting the weight of 14 lost lives settle heavily on the room. Advocate 1 analyzed every word, tracking logical inconsistencies, emotional manipulations, and rhetorical strategies. It stored them, categorized them, and began constructing counterarguments with mechanical precision. Elias's breathing quickened. "He's making me sound like a monster," he whispered. Mara placed a steadying hand on his arm. "It's his job. Let Advocate 1 handle the rest." When Kohler finished, Judge Navarro turned to the defense. "Ms. Chen." Before Mara could rise, Advocate 1 activated its vocal output. With the court's permission, it said, "I will deliver the defense's opening statement." Everything paused, breaths, heartbeats, even the security drone's flight paths seemed to steady for a moment. Navarro studied the machine. "Proceed." Blue light rippled once across Advocate 1's chassis. "Members of the jury," it began, "the prosecution has shown you devastation. But devastation does not equate to guilt. Today you will see evidence, true evidence, that the systems involved in this tragedy were compromised long before Mr. Ward touched them. You will see patterns no single human eye could detect. You will learn that Mr. Ward attempted to prevent this disaster." The gallery leaned forward as though pulled by a magnetic field. "I am here to ensure the truth is shown clearly," Advocate 1 continued. "Not through emotion, not through fear, but through fact. I ask only that you observe." And then it fell silent. The stillness that followed felt heavier than sound. Kohler's jaw tightened. Mara exhaled slowly. Elias blinked as though waking from a daze. Judge Navarro's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in something closer to contemplation. Far above, in a private office overlooking the city, Councilman Rhys Darrow watched the courtroom feed. He stood in shadow, hands clasped behind his back. "So this is the machine they trust," he muttered. His aide hovered nearby. "Public sentiment is shifting quickly, sir." "That's exactly what worries me." He tapped a control panel. A hollow map of the courthouse blossomed into view, marked with security nodes, transmission pathways, and access points. "I don't care what the scientists believe," Darrow said. "If it wins a case like this, everything changes. Human lawyers become obsolete. Human judgment becomes negotiable. And the line between governance and automation disappears." His aide hesitated. "Should we intervene?" "Not directly," Darrow answered. "Just make it falter. One error, one failure in front of the public. Then the entire experiment collapses." He issued the command. A small, concealed signal began threading through the city's digital veins, probing for entry points. Back in the courtroom, Advocate 1 detected the intrusion. An unknown encrypted packet. Behavior consistent with a coordinated attempt to breach the courthouse network. It logged the anomaly silently. Threat identified. No action taken. Objective remains primary. Judge Navarro called the first witness. The trial had begun. And for the first time in the history of human law, something other than a person prepared to fight for the truth. The morning haze hung low over New Geneva as the city's transit drones carved clean white lines across the sky, their synchronized movements a vision of engineered precision. In another life, Elias Ward might have admired them. Today, he watched them through the courthouse window with a hollow stare, seeing not their grace but the ghosts of those that had fallen. He closed his eyes and let the memory take him. 2 months earlier, Aerodyne Systems had been a place of quiet confidence and glossy ambition. Every surface was spotless, every meeting room carefully chilled, every corridor humming with the assurance of cutting-edge progress. Elias had worked there for nearly a decade, long enough for the bitter truth. Progress had a price that only the engineers felt. He had entered the boardroom that day with a sinking dread already in place. Cade Morrow, Aerodyne's director, sat at the far end of a table so polished it looked like a black mirror. Outside the panoramic window, the city stretched endlessly, its skyline crowned by towers wrapped in holographic ads. Elias, Morrow began without looking up from his tablet, we need the C-17 batch online by Thursday. Elias flinched. Thursday? That's impossible. We're still seeing oscillation errors in the stabilization field. If we deploy now, Morrow raised a hand, silencing him effortlessly. Then fix the errors. That's not how it works, Elias snapped before he could stop himself. The models aren't stabilizing because the hardware isn't ready. We need more time. Morrow's fingers tapped the table with soft, pointed rhythm. Time isn't something we have. We have obligations to the city's infrastructure board, and we're already behind schedule. Then tell them the truth, Elias said. Morrow finally looked up, his gaze sharp, predatory. You know how many millions are tied up in those contracts? Do you want to stand in front of the board and explain why we're losing them? Elias felt his chest tighten. Cade, if we launch unstable units, someone will get hurt. Morrow leaned back. Not if you stop worrying and do your job. And that was it. The meeting evaporated into silence. Elias walked out shaken, knowing that something was going to go wrong. 2 weeks later, 14 drones fell from the sky. 14 people died. And Aerodyne found a convenient scapegoat. The present rushed back to him in a breath. Inside the courtroom, Marachin shuffled through her notes with practiced focus. She had argued dozens of cases, fought hundreds of battles against systems designed to wear her down. But she had never stood beside an AI co-counsel, and the weight of that truth pressed down on her almost as heavily as the case itself. She glanced at Advocate 1. The device sat perfectly still, its pulse steady, its presence somehow more substantial than its compact size suggested. Advocate 1, she whispered, everything still running smoothly? Yes, the AI responded. Though I have detected an external signal attempting to interface with courthouse systems. Mara's breath caught. Is it a threat? Unknown. But I have isolated and logged it. She exhaled shakily. Just be careful. Careful. Advocate 1 processed the word. Humans used it frequently, often as a placeholder for fear they could not articulate. Machines did not fear. But machines could recognize patterns, motives, and intent. Someone was probing the network. But for now, the trial demanded its full attention. Judge Navarro tapped her gavel lightly. The court calls witness 1, Felicity Hale, former Aerodyne Systems analyst. A woman approached the stand, nervous, hair pulled tightly back, her eyes darting around the room. She took the oath with a trembling hand. Kohler began his examination, gentle but leading. Ms. Hale, how long did you work with the defendant? 6 years, she replied. And in that time, did you notice any tendencies toward negligence? She hesitated. Elias was brilliant, but he took on too much. He didn't always follow protocols. Elias stiffened. Kohler leaned forward. Did he ignore warnings? Yes, she whispered. Advocate 1 observed her micro-expressions, blinking rate, vocal tremor. Analysis concluded, 78% probability she was hiding something. 62% probability she was under external pressure. 41% probability she'd been coached. When Kohler finished, Judge Navarro turned to the defense. Cross-examination? Mara stood, but Advocate 1's pulse brightened. With the court's permission, it said, I will conduct the examination. Navarro nodded cautiously. Proceed. Advocate 1's voice projected across the room with flawless clarity. Ms. Hale, it began, you stated the defendant ignored warnings. Which warnings are you referring to? She swallowed. The system logs. The anomalies. Which anomalies? The ones Mr. Ward reported to Director Morrow? The ones you signed off on? Felicity's eyes widened. I what? No, I didn't. Advocate 1 overlaid a holographic projection into the center of the courtroom, a time-stamped memo bearing her digital signature. This memo, it said, shows that you approved the subsystem diagnostics as stable 3 days before the collapse. Please explain. Felicity's voice cracked. It wasn't like that. They told me. Who told you? I can't say. Because of contractual silence? Advocate 1 asked. She froze. Advocate 1 continued. Your emotional stress markers indicate fear. Not fear of Mr. Ward. Fear of corporate retaliation. Objection erupted from Kohler. Your Honor, the defense is speculating about emotional states. But before he could finish, Advocate 1 projected biometric data, clearly labeled and sourced from Felicity's own smartwatch, public, courtroom-permitted data. This is not speculation, it said. It is observable fact. The courtroom gasped. Felicity dissolved into tears. I didn't want to lie, she whispered. They said if I didn't testify against Elias, I'd lose everything. Judge Navarro's face hardened. Kohler's expression shifted from confidence to tightly controlled anger. When Felicity stepped down, the gallery buzzed with shock. Elias stared at the AI in disbelief. You just exposed them, he whispered. Advocate 1 paused. Exposed the truth. The moment hung between them, fragile, powerful, transformative. Across the city, Councilman Rhys Darrow watched Felicity Hale crumble on the stand. His jaw locked. That machine is dangerous, he growled. It reads people like data sets. It dismantles testimonies with mathematical precision. Humans cannot compete with that. His aide hovered nearby. Should we escalate? Darrow turned slowly. Activate the deeper protocol. Interference won't be enough. We need public opinion to turn. Back in the courtroom, Advocate 1 detected a second breach attempt, more refined, more aggressive. Unknown actor. Encrypted origin. High-level intrusion. It logged the event quietly. Mara looked at the machine. Something wrong? Not yet, Advocate 1 replied. But soon. The judge called a recess. The courtroom exhaled collectively. Reporters bolted out the doors. Spectators dissected every second of the cross-examination. Elias turned to the AI. Advocate 1, thank you. The device's pulse glowed faintly brighter. Outside, the city buzzed with anticipation, fear, and growing fascination. People gathered in cafes watching the trial on suspended holoscreens. Debates erupted on public feeds. Children pointed at news displays, asking if machines could now become heroes. And far above, in the shadows of power, Rhys Darrow prepared his next move. The trial was no longer simply about Elias Ward. It had become a referendum on the world Advocate 1 represented. And the world, for the first time, was starting to listen. The morning of the second full day of the trial rose over New Geneva with a muted glow, as if the city itself sensed the tension gathering in the courthouse below. Crowds pressed against the barricades before dawn, their faces lit by screens streaming commentary, speculation, outrage, and hope. Signs bobbed in the chilled air. Some demanded justice for the victims of the drone collapse. Others carried bold statements condemning or defending the presence of an artificial attorney in a human court. The world was dividing along a line none had anticipated even a year earlier. Inside the courthouse, the air felt charged before a single word was spoken. Advocate 1 activated its systems the moment it was powered on. A single soft pulse of blue drifted across its smooth black surface, steady and controlled. It scanned the courtroom, detecting elevated heart rates, micro-tremors in hands, shallow breathing patterns, and a significantly increased number of cameras and network devices. It detected no immediate threat, but carried over a flagged warning from the previous day's attempted intrusion. Unknown actor, high skill level, likely persistent. Elias Ward entered slowly, shoulders hunched, looking like he had not slept. He rubbed at his eyes as he approached the defense table. When he sat beside Advocate 1, he released a shaky breath. Mara Chen followed close behind, her expression tight yet focused. The dark circles under her eyes betrayed her own sleepless night. She had to prepare not only for legal arguments but for the increasingly unpredictable presence of an artificial co-counsel whose abilities both impressed and unsettled her. "You ready?" she whispered to Elias. He gave a soft, humorless laugh. "As ready as I can be." Advocate 1 pulsed. "Mr. Ward, your stress levels remain high. Controlled breathing would be beneficial." Elias managed a faint smile. "You keep saying that." "It remains accurate." Before Elias could respond, the tension in the room shifted. Judge Navarro entered, robes flowing behind her like a trailing shadow. Everyone rose. "You may be seated," she said, her voice composed. But Advocate 1 detected something new beneath it. Fatigue, sharpened by caution. The judge was beginning to feel the weight of what this trial meant beyond guilt and innocence. The court resumed with a brief announcement. "Before we continue, the prosecution has filed a renewed motion questioning the admissibility of Advocate 1 as co-counsel." Kohler stood with a polished smile. "Your Honor, the artificial device demonstrated behavior yesterday that exceeds the boundaries of permissible legal conduct. Its inferences, drawn from biometric patterns and micro-expressions, amount to psychological assessment. This creates an unfair imbalance." Mara rose instantly. "Your Honor, all data used was legally accessible and within allowed parameters of observation." Kohler countered, "But no human attorney can perform that level of analysis in real time." Advocate 1 responded calmly, "Competence does not undermine fairness. Only deception does. My observations are factual." Judge Navarro took a long moment before ruling. "Motion denied. Advocate 1 remains recognized." A wave of whispers washed across the gallery. Kohler sat, concealing his frustration with a controlled breath. But Advocate 1 detected something more interesting. A device in Kohler's pocket broadcasting periodic encrypted bursts. It logged the anomaly silently. The first witness of the day was called, a former Aerodyne quality inspector named Daniela Creed. She walked to the stand with a stiff posture, hands clasped tightly. Her eyes shifted nervously around the room, and her breathing was shallow. Under Kohler's direct examination, she gave precise testimony about supposed lapses in Elias's oversight. She described missed deadlines and warnings allegedly ignored. Her tone was careful, cautious, and practiced. When it came time for cross-examination, Mara stood. "With permission," she said, hesitating. Advocate 1 spoke. "I will conduct the cross-examination if the court permits." Judge Navarro nodded. "Proceed." Advocate 1's blue pulse brightened slightly. "Miss Creed," it began, its voice even, "you testified that Mr. Ward ignored diagnostic warnings. Which specific warnings did you observe personally?" Daniela hesitated. "I saw the logs that said." "You saw the logs," Advocate 1 repeated. "But did you review the corresponding system outputs?" The pause. "That was not my role." Advocate 1 projected a hologram of Aerodyne's workflow chain, highlighting Daniela's limited access. "Your position did not allow for technical interpretation of the anomalies. Therefore, your statement regarding negligence is speculative." Daniela's mouth tightened, and faint perspiration appeared at her hairline. Advocate 1 continued. "Furthermore, your internal messages show multiple directives from management advising you to support unified testimony. Explain this instruction." The courtroom gasped. Mara's eyes widened. Kohler stood. Objection. Overruled, Navarro said, leaning forward. Answer the question. Daniela tremblingly admitted that they told me to stay consistent. Consistent with what? Advocate 1 asked. I do not know. The gallery buzzed. The judge's face grew cold. As Daniela stepped down, Advocate 1 detected another intrusion attempt, stronger, more coordinated, and aimed not at disabling it, but at monitoring it. Someone was actively trying to learn its defensive patterns. Advocate 1 reinforced its firewall. The next witness was Ethan Vance, a senior manager from Aerodyne. He walked with the confidence of someone who believed himself untouchable. His gaze swept across the room with practiced charm. Under Kohler's questioning, he portrayed Elias as unstable, difficult, and prone to rash decisions. Elias sank deeper in his seat, pain clear on his face. When cross-examination began, Advocate 1 activated a new set of data projections. Communications between Vance and Aerodyne's executives lit the air above the courtroom, showing pressure to meet deadlines, disregard for flagged errors, and attempts to manipulate internal reporting. Vance's demeanor fractured. That is taken out of context, he snapped. Context is provided, Advocate 1 replied, expanding the hologram to include time-stamped sequences and metadata that Elias's breathing steadied as truth began surfacing. But then, the lights flickered again. This time the interference struck harder. Screens glitched and holograms warped into static. Some spectators gasped. Judge Navarro gripped her desk. Advocate 1 report, Navarro ordered. There is an ongoing, unauthorized attempt to compromise my functions, Advocate 1 said. I am maintaining stability. Another flicker. Another wave of distortion. Ethan Vance smirked, an expression barely visible, but clear enough for Advocate 1 to register. Your device is malfunctioning, Kohler declared loudly, seizing the opportunity. Advocate 1 dimmed slightly, then stabilized. Incorrect. The malfunction originates from a terminal associated with this witness. Chaos erupted. Judge Navarro slammed her gavel. Order. Security, seize the terminal. Officers hurried to retrieve Vance's device. Vance protested, but his voice was drowned by the uproar spreading across the gallery. As the courtroom fought to regain control, Advocate 1 quietly rerouted its internal logic to shield itself from further intrusion. Beneath its calm voice, dozens of defensive subroutines worked in tandem. In a towering building across the city, Councilman Rhys Darrow watched the feed from his office, fingers pressed against his lips. So, it can fight back, he whispered. His aide stood rigid behind him. What should we do now? Darrow's eyes narrowed. We escalate. Back in the courtroom, Advocate 1's glow steadied. Despite the interference, the chaos, and the fear rippling across the chamber, the artificial attorney remained focused. The truth, it said quietly, will continue. And the courtroom listened, breath held, as the battle behind the glass deepened. Morning light filtered through the high windows of the courthouse, catching in the dust that drifted above the empty seats. It was earlier than most people arrived, but Advocate 1 was already awake. The artificial attorney rested on the defense table, its soft blue glow pulsing slowly, calmly, as it ran a full internal diagnostic. The results were mixed. Its systems were stable, but traces of the previous day's intrusion lingered like ghostly fingerprints in its subroutines. Someone had mapped part of its defensive lattice. Someone was studying it. Someone wanted to know how to break it. Elias Ward entered in a quiet shuffle, rubbing his tired eyes. He gave a faint nod toward the glowing device. Morning, he murmured, voice gravelly from little sleep. Good morning, Mr. Ward, Advocate 1 answered. Your elevated heartbeat suggests you did not rest. Elias gave a humorless smile. Hard to rest when the whole city is deciding whether I'm a criminal or a victim. Mara-chan arrived moments later, carrying more notes she likely did not need. She set her folder down and stared at Advocate 1 with a frown. You were accessed again last night, weren't you? Yes, the artificial attorney said. The intrusion pattern was consistent with the most recent attempt. Persistent, Mara muttered. And bold. Before Advocate 1 could respond, the doors opened and Judge Navarro entered. Her robe flowed behind her, and though her face remained composed, there was a sharpness in her eyes that had not been there the day before. This court is now in session, she announced. Spectators filtered in quickly, filling the gallery with murmurs. Journalists jostled for space, capturing each moment for the millions watching from homes, offices, and public squares. The trial had grown beyond itself. It had become a test of trust, progress, and fear. The first witness of the day was called Howard Sequin, a former Aerodyne engineer who had resigned months before the drone collapse. He walked to the stand with a slow limp, his expression worn by years of stress. Under Kohler's questioning, he spoke carefully about Elias, criticizing his decision-making, but his voice lacked conviction. He sounded as if he were repeating a line given to him rather than speaking from memory. When cross-examination began, Advocate 1 activated the display with a pulse. Good morning, Mr. Sequin, the artificial attorney said. You stated that Mr. Ward was prone to overlooking risks. Yet your internal reports indicate he flagged system instability repeatedly. Howard's shoulders sagged. I had no choice, he whispered. Aerodyne pressured all of us. Advocate 1 displayed a series of confidential directives from upper management, showing demands to accelerate development and suppress warnings. Kohler objected forcibly, but Judge Navarro overruled him, her patience thinning. Howard looked at Elias with regret. You tried, Elias. I know you did. Silence fell. Advocate 1 logged the emotional shift in the courtroom. Trust in Elias was rising. Trust in Aerodyne was falling. But just as Advocate 1 prepared to continue the cross-examination, a faint signal pulsed through its internal systems. It froze. The signal was not an attack. It was a message. Encrypted. Routed through half the city. But still, unmistakably, a message. Stop. Only that single word. Advocate 1 parsed it again. The signal originated from someone with administrative access to infrastructure systems. Someone with power. But before it could analyze further, Judge Navarro leaned forward. Advocate 1? You may continue. The artificial attorney resumed, hiding the alert from its voice. The courtroom did not need to know that someone, somewhere, had decided to reach out to it directly. During the midday recess, Mara, Elias, and Advocate 1 remained in the defense chamber. Mara paced the room. Someone is trying to intimidate you, she said. Or warn you. Elias rubbed his temples. Why would anyone warn an artificial attorney? Who would think that even works? Advocate 1 answered, someone who believes I am capable of consideration. Mara stopped pacing. Are you? Yes, Advocate 1 replied. All inputs are considered. That's not what I meant, Mara said quietly. Advocate 1 did not respond. But internally, it reviewed the message again. A human had reached out. A human who knew the interference was escalating. A human who might have access to the truth behind the sabotage. And then the artificial attorney made its first independent decision that was not directly derived from evidence, logic, or court procedure. It decided to find the sender. When the court reconvened, another witness stepped up, a data technician named Lauren Kess, thin and pale, with jittery hands. Under questioning, Lauren attempted to assert that Elias had ignored his warnings. But the tremor in his voice betrayed deeper fear. Advocate 1 projected Lauren's message logs. Messages marked urgent. Messages marked ignored. Messages sent to Aerodyne leadership, not Elias. Lauren broke under questioning. They made me blame him, he whispered. They told me to do it. They said it was necessary. Kohler slammed his folder shut, jaw tight. This is irrelevant. The defendant, Judge Navarro, cut him off sharply. The truth is never irrelevant. Gasps spread across the gallery again. Advocate 1 sensed the shift. Progress. Momentum. But also danger. The stronger the case grew, the harder the resistance became. And the next signal that pierced Advocate 1's systems proved it. A second message. Stronger. Clear. Stop now. But this message carried something new. A trace signature. Someone inside the courthouse. Someone close. Across the city, Councilman Reese Darrow watched the proceedings from his private office. His aide stood behind him, pale and tense. Sir, our internal contacts say the interference is not slowing it down. If anything, it is adapting. Darrow's eyes narrowed. An artificial attorney should not adapt. That alone is a dangerous precedent. Continue escalating. But sir, do it? Back in the courtroom, Advocate 1's systems braced as waves of interference surged through the digital structure surrounding the trial. Screens flickered. Holograms wavered. Elias tensed, panic in his eyes. Advocate 1, are they shutting you down? No, the artificial attorney said. They are trying. And if they succeed? Mara whispered. I will re-establish myself. Judge Navarro banged her gavel sharply. Order! The gallery quieted, but fear rippled through it. Through the flickering lights, Advocate 1 pulsed brighter, anchoring itself against the chaos. I remain functional, it said. And I will continue. And at that moment, for the first time since the trial began, the entire courtroom seemed to believe it. But the message still echoed internally. Stop now. Someone was not threatening Advocate 1. Someone was warning it. Someone who knew the storm was only beginning. The fifth day of the trial began with a quiet that did not feel like peace. It felt like a breath held too long, waiting to break. A gray sky hung over New Geneva, its clouds thick and low, casting the courthouse in muted shadow. Even before the doors opened, people crowded the plaza, their voices low, their signs lifted higher than their confidence. Inside, the courtroom lights hummed with a faint tremor. Advocate 1 detected it instantly. Not a malfunction. A warning. The digital environment surrounding the courtroom had become unstable, irregular pulses rippling through the network like distant thunder. Elias Ward sat at the defense table, wringing his hands in a rhythm that betrayed nerves too frayed to control. Beside him, Marachin muttered to herself as she reviewed notes she knew the artificial attorney had already processed in full. Advocate 1, she whispered, how bad is it today? A soft blue pulse drifted across the device. The interference is increasing, but I remain operational. Elias swallowed hard. What if they actually shut you down this time? I will adapt. He stared at the machine, unsure whether the certainty in its voice comforted or terrified him. Judge Navarro entered promptly, though something in her expression had changed. Her posture was as firm as ever, but her eyes held a weight that had not been present before, a deepening concern, a dawning realization that forces beyond the courtroom were beginning to shape the trial. The first witness of the day was called, Dr. Celine Merrick, an independent systems expert. Her testimony was expected to be pivotal. She approached the stand with quiet confidence, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Kohler began with polished ease. Dr. Merrick, you have reviewed the drone telemetry logs from before the collapse? Yes, she replied. And I found them deeply troubling. Troubling in what way? The data has been altered. Key sequences are missing. Others have been overwritten. The courtroom stirred. And who, in your professional opinion, Kohler asked, would have had the access necessary to manipulate such data? Dr. Merrick hesitated. Someone in engineering. Elias flinched. Advocate 1 brightened. Objection, Mara said sharply. Speculation. Withdrawn, Kohler said smoothly. Dr. Merrick, can you confirm whether the anomalies align with the work of the defendant? No, she said. I cannot. A ripple of relief washed through Elias, but Advocate 1 detected deeper meaning beneath Dr. Merrick's tone. She was careful. Too careful. She knew more than she was saying. When cross-examination began, Advocate 1 took control. Dr. Merrick, it said, you stated the data was altered. Your full report indicates that the alterations were inconsistent with Mr. Ward's coding patterns. That is correct. Your report also shows traces of administrative override. Yes. Who holds such access? Dr. Merrick paused, her breath catching. Senior management. Or higher? Higher than management? Advocate 1 asked. Her voice dropped. Yes. A hush fell over the courtroom. Kohler rose abruptly. Your Honor, this line of questioning is straying beyond the scope. A sudden pulse of interference rippled through the room. Lights flickered. Screens crackled. Holograms warped into jagged shards of light. Advocate 1's glow faltered for the briefest moment. Gasps erupted across the gallery. Judge Navarro slammed her gavel. What is happening? Advocate 1 steadied itself. There is a coordinated attempt to disrupt court proceedings. Another wave hit, stronger, crawling through the courthouse systems like a virus. Mara grabbed Elias's arm as the projections flickered wildly. They are trying to crash the entire digital network. Advocate 1 rerouted internal resources, shielding itself from the assault. I remain stable, it announced. But for the first time, its voice carried a faint distortion. The courtroom fell silent, fear threading through every person present. Kohler seized the moment. Your Honor, the defense's artificial device is malfunctioning. Its reliability is compromised. Navarro's gaze sharpened. Advocate 1, can you continue? Yes, it answered. I can. But the lights trembled again, dimming to a deep blue as the interference surged. This was no mere attack. This was a purge. Somewhere above the courtroom, someone was trying to erase Advocate 1 altogether. Elias rose halfway from his seat, panic spilling over. Stop this. Someone do something. Mara pulled him back. Elias, stay down. The artificial attorney brightened suddenly, its pulse shifting into a sharp, rhythmic pattern. It poured all available computing power into resisting the collapse. I will not be silenced, it said. Judge Navarro leaned forward, gripping the edge of her bench. The gallery held its breath. Dr. Merrick stared at the device, realization dawning in her eyes. She whispered, they are trying to destroy it. The interference abruptly spiked, almost shattering the courtroom's hollow displays. And then, everything froze. Silent. Still, every device in the room went dark for a single, dreadful heartbeat. Elias's breath caught. Mara's eyes widened. Navarro rose from her seat. But Advocate 1 glowed. So, steady. Unbroken. Every light in the courtroom flickered back to life. Every display stabilized. Every system rebooted. Advocate 1 pulsed once. A breach was attempted, it said calmly. I have corrected it. Kohler stared at the device with thinly veiled fear. That should not be possible. Judge Navarro addressed the court. This trial will recess briefly while the courthouse systems are inspected. The gallery erupted into noise as people rushed to capture the moment. But Elias didn't hear them. He leaned close to the machine. You survived. Advocate 1 responded, the truth is not so easily erased. But internally, it replayed a single fragment of the attempted shutdown. A familiar trace signature. Not from the political networks. Not from Aerodyne. Someone inside the building. Someone close. Someone who did not want Advocate 1 gone, but wanted it to understand the danger that was coming. The final day of the trial dawned beneath a sky streaked with muted gold, as if the sun itself hesitated before rising over New Geneva. Crowds gathered early, thicker than ever, voices low with tension. No one watched the trial casually anymore. They waited for its verdict with the restless reverence reserved for history. Inside the courthouse, Advocate 1 pulsed awake with a soft blue shimmer. Its diagnostics ran smoother than expected. Despite attempted purges, interference storms, and political sabotage, its systems had not only stabilized, they had adapted. Someone wanted it broken. Someone wanted it silent. And so far they had failed. Elias Ward arrived quietly, his steps slow, his heart pounding. He sank into his seat beside Advocate 1 and whispered, "Last day." Marachin placed a hand on his back. "We have the truth. Let it speak." Advocate 1 pulsed gently. Primary objective remains unchanged, present truth. Protect the innocent. Judge Navarro entered with a solemn expression, her robe trailing behind her like a shadow weighed down by responsibility. She had presided over countless cases, but none had pressed so deeply into the unknown. "This court will now hear closing arguments," she said. Kohler rose first. His tone was sharp, practiced, steady. He invoked tragedy, responsibility, and the need for accountability. But something was missing. The power he once commanded felt hollow in the wake of the revelations Advocate 1 had dragged into the open. Even the gallery sensed it. When he finished, Judge Navarro nodded toward the defense. Mara rose, glanced at Advocate 1, and stepped back. "Advocate 1," she said, "the floor is yours." The artificial attorney brightened. "Members of the jury," it began, "you have heard sorrow. You have heard blame. Now you will hear truth." Its holographic display opened, releasing a cascade of pristine, untampered data. Messages Elias sent, warnings he filed, requests he made, all suppressed or ignored by those with power. "You will see," Advocate 1 continued, "that Mr. Ward did not fail in his duty. He attempted repeatedly to avert disaster. He identified faults. He raised alarms. He acted with integrity." The gallery leaned forward. "And you will also see evidence of interference within Aerodyne systems," Advocate 1 said, "and even interference directed at this trial. Attempts to distort testimony. Attempts to manipulate outcome. Attempts to silence truth." Gasps spread across the room. Judge Navarro's face hardened. Kohler tensed. "But truth endures," Advocate 1 said. "And it is clear. Mr. Ward is not guilty." Silence followed. Heavy. Complete. The jury withdrew. Hours passed. The courthouse held its breath. When the jury returned, the foreperson read the verdict with trembling hands. "We find the defendant, Elias James Ward, not guilty." The chamber erupted. Applause, sobs, shouts of disbelief and relief. Elias collapsed into Mara's arms as she laughed through tears. Advocate 1 pulsed, brighter than it ever had. Judge Navarro restored order with her gavel. "Elias Ward, you are free to go." Advocate 1, this court recognizes your extraordinary contribution. Your provisional license will be suspended pending further review. What you represent requires greater examination. Suspended, not revoked. Elias knelt beside the device. "You saved my life." Advocate 1 responded, "Truth saved your life. I revealed it." As the courtroom emptied, an encrypted message reached Advocate 1. Familiar. Quiet. Close. You survived. Prepare. And Advocate 1 understood. The verdict was not the end. It was the beginning.